for board. Oh, he's not.
They touch the screen.
Oh, I got you. That first hour, I could just go in and do sit in here, do it again. But the vulnerability management plan is called a plan because that way it doesn't, because people at a school district feel that policies are board approved. A plan is something that just sits down in the IT department, and and our job as Cyber Reserve anytime is to write those plans for you. So if it saves you 10 hours writing this plan, which that's probably what it is by the time it was written and checked by Mike Novak and Victor Mascari a couple years ago, and then been updated since, you don't have to do that. And then by the time we distribute that to 14,500, you can imagine just one plan like this, we distribute it throughout Ohio, has just saved us about 146,000 hours of work, which is like 70 work years. So that's the other advantage about being where you're all working together with the ITC, ESCs, and the Cyber Reserve. Anytime you're coming up with something, and let's say you were doing something clever at your school district, and you came up with a plan that you didn't see that we had, then you could write it, get it to Jerry, get it to whoever inside your organization, to where other people can have access as a template, take out the things about your school, and then you could say, hey, I contributed this to the whole thing, or you get it all the way back to Cyber Reserve, and we're distributing it through all of Ohio times 14,500. So all I need you to do is write in your organization name on here, and sometime, I don't expect everybody, we're going to review this a little bit here today, but we'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and review the key points. But in the vulnerability management plan, when it gets down into the sections where, past the scope and purpose, which is going to be the same for every organization in the whole world, I would go in and say, but let's say there's something where you're going to check logs, and we'll go ahead and pick on individuals in the room. Does anybody here check their logs every day? Like their server logs? They just go in and have nothing to do. They get to work early at 5:30 in the morning, and they check all their server logs every morning. Good. Yeah, nobody raised their hand. That's excellent, because if you did that, they could probably last for about a week, and then you'd be going like this, say, this is silly. Logs can be checked manually. Yes, they can be. Logs are important, but after a while, I would see, like, you'd have dark circles under your eyes, and you'd be burned out, and your superintendent would be complaining about you, and the treasurer would be complaining about you, the principal would be complaining about you because you'd be grumpy, because you're trying to do everything, right? I mean, is checking logs important? Yes. But if you did it every day by yourself, there would be a point to where you hit a point of no return, and you've heard about the cyber burnout that you go on Google right now and type in cyber burnout and read about people who do that. And I will tell you that's not a good plan. How many people check their logs once a month? So yeah. So it would be a good idea if we checked our logs, at least a log. Let's say like our logs are being like, denial of service, because every time, if you read Grimes' book, which we put out there in seminar number 1, every single time we go in and show up to a school district or a city or a county or a hospital to respond, we can see the perpetrator in your logs every time. Every single time a city or entity is attacked, we can see that they were in your logs, that they were in your system for the last 18 months. In other words, the evidence was always there. Now, they sprang their trap on you 18 months after they were in your system, but a cyber reservist can see where they're in your logs the whole time. So not looking at your logs is ever, but the thing is, our challenge as we do vulnerability management is how we do that in a intelligent manner. How do we do that in a layered defense? And that's what our discussion about today. But I will tell you, in vulnerability management, you can spot the bad person in your system every single time. Every single time they have a cyber attack, you can go back to the ticketing system, and we can spot on in your ticketing system where your own technicians told me for the last 3 weeks you had an increased amount of activity in your network. So like if we were at Huber Heights, we could go into Huber Heights and look at their logs and look at their ticketing system. Says they were there for the last week. We can actually see them in your systems for the last 2 months. They were that sloppy. So the logs will catch them. Then here's the other kicker. They're in your admin. They have an admin password to your system. They're in your system as an admin. That's even more special. They weren't just a user, they were an admin. So if you never look at the logs and you say like, so all of a sudden you see on a server that somebody changed because the perpetrator's in there, and somebody changed your backup system because they're going to encrypt your backups, right? You know, change all your storage systems so they can do that encryption. And then all of a sudden, we can see that the person was doing something in your server at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. And then I would ask any of you, were you in your system at 2 o'clock on a Sunday morning? And you're like, no. Well, guess what? Somebody was. And that's what the logs will tell you. Or my favorite one is when the perpetrators don't want to do it and they have admin level, they're deleting entries in your logs. Like all your logs for, you know, on certain days are missing. And you're like, who deleted all my logs from last week? Well, they're covering their tracks. But by covering their tracks, they also created a track because the logs for last week have been deleted. So that's what vulnerability management is about. It's about monitoring. Now, all of you, here's a question you all can raise your hand at. How many people work like crazy just to keep the students and teachers happy? Come on, raise your hand. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, everybody raise their hand. You got so much work to do. He said, Charles, I would love to check my logs or have a program to check my logs, but you know, gosh, I got to run a school district, and some of us are like 1 against 5,000 or 1 against 3,000, and you know, so obviously, school districts like banks and hospitals, we got to start sharing the wealth, you know, and do that. It's not going to all change overnight, but we're going to get there. So it begins with having a vulnerability management plan. So we'll do that. And then we're going to talk about vulnerability management all day today. It's not a huge plan. And then when we go out here and we look at these things, when you do find a vulnerability on your system, you're going to change these numbers at your school district. This is on page number 4. Because if you find a critical vulnerability, does anybody can give me an example of a critical vulnerability at your school district? You could have somebody in the front office click on a phishing email, and then you could have Jerry Neidel or Troy send you a alert that comes into the CISA vulnerability scans and says, we think you have a computer IP, blah, 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 a certain address, and it's broadcasting over the ITC or ESC. In other words, we can see it at our level. You have IP address such and such who's showed up on our monitoring that's just sending data like crazy to Eastern Europe. And that will show up on their vulnerability scans, right? Troy said yes. He's shaking his head yes. It'll show up in the ITC's vulnerability scans. That's critical. Now, you might say, I want to go in and do service in 24 hours. But right now, whatever that number is in your plan, you need to go in and come to a decision like, hey, based upon how many people I got, if it was at my organization back in Columbus, we like to always do things in less than 24 hours. So if we had something critical, we typically say, but right now, I got this from another ITC, so I left it in there. And so you just need to come to an agreement, and the next time you're talking to Jerry or Troy or whoever, you say, hey, if you tell me about a critical whatever, how long should I get to resolve that? And just make a decision. You could say 7 days. Well, the only thing is that becomes the rule at your school district, that we have 7 days to do critical. So, where it's high down here, 90, low. I've been in organizations where I've had something on my books that's in my network that's been there for a year. Because it's so low and I just don't have any resources to put anybody on. But it's such a low priority. So I think 180 days is like, wow, that's great. So when you start to go in and do ticketing and you start to do deciding about how you're going to do monitoring, these are one of the early decisions. What if Jerry, the ITC or the ESC that you're working with tells you of a vulnerability, what day up there can you communicate and use it in your school district? And so if the superintendent asks you, like, how fast can you fix a critical problem? Well, I know. How fast can I go and deal with IP 170 in my, I can walk up to that teacher's one and say, hey, and take the cable, unplug it. I just fixed it. There is detection, right? And then I did containment. Containment means what? And if you guys know your list 800-61 by heart, detection, containment. So you'll see sometimes in the remediation plan, or we talk about ahead of time, we want to disconnect that broadcasting device and quit broadcasting information over to Eastern Europe. So if your plan in your front office is to tell people, hey, if a computer is working like, it's just like your computer is like taking over, and the EMIS coordinator says, it looks like my computer is like it's just working weird. And you said, okay, anytime you think like, and especially like, I just was shopping on my computer at work, and then in the next 5 seconds, it's like, it seems to be locked up, but really what it's doing, we all know what it's doing, is transmitting data. And so you say, hey, if you clicked on something, an email, and all of a sudden your computer seems like it's possessed, turn the power off. That's called containment. Because if they call you, let's say you're in a meeting, you don't get there for 2 hours, and then you walk up there and say, man, this thing's been transmitting to Bulgaria for the last 2 hours, all this data. And then you go in and you get the forensics people, like go to the ITC, and they say, yeah, for 2 hours, we were uploading all the EMIS data to Eastern Europe. Well, maybe in the vulnerability plan is, we go in and we write in there and say, we start putting out little notices that if you're a critical person, a counselor, an EMIS coordinator, the school nurse, and your computer looks like it's possessed, you all know what that means. Like, it's like the keyboard's not responding, but you can show them like, hey, this is the little hard drive thing going on. Then you need to go in and turn that computer off and contact me through your ticketing system, whatever, work system that you're using at your school. And then you could look at that computer. And then you would have in your plan, vulnerability management plan, hey, I think this computer, and then the person tells you, I was buying tickets for the Ohio State football game and thinking that site didn't look right after all. Now you're the person sitting there going like, oh, I think you might have clicked on a phishing one. I think it downloaded some software. I think it was uploading your data to Bulgaria or wherever. You can call the ITCs and say, hey, I got IP address such and such and such and such. do you guys have that? Oh, yeah, and then the IT, the person farther down the road that there says, yep, that showed up there, we didn't get that triggered to you right away, but we can see it. We can see the data that was being uploaded. And now you have an incident. Because 250 pieces, records of data, and according, remember, in the incident response plan, it tells you how many pieces of data. It doesn't mean, well, I'm sorry, we have an event. And then when you write out the report. Now, we have a fusion center in Ohio being built in Columbus to eventually, but we've gone through this where the forensics people come in, the cybersecurity insurance company usually has forensics people, and they come in and they review a report and say, this is exactly what this computer did, and it'll tell you exactly what time it did and stuff like that. Of course, then legal will be involved at your school district, and then they'll see what data got sent to Bulgaria. All starts out here with page 4. The critical, maybe the low one, we don't worry so much about. We can just leave it 90 to 80. But based upon your experience, and we're going to be talking about that today, based upon your experience in your ticketing system, this is, just because this was written in here in the template doesn't mean that's the numbers you're going to use. You have to come up with those days. And at the beginning, you could say less than 3 days. You could agree, because this came out of another school district, ITC. And you could say, this is what we want to use. Just decide. If you leave it as is, that becomes, and this is your adopted plan, then this is what you're telling the superintendent. Hey, when it comes to vulnerability management, this is what we're doing. Less than 3 days. I will tell you what's a problem with certain laptops. Vulnerability management, blah, 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 terms and stuff like that. You can read it. Should you sit down and read this whole document in one day? Yes. But you know me, I did this for you. And so there's a PowerPoint in there, and it just goes through and it tells you vulnerability management is 800-92, 815. That means that you're in Hawaii on vacation in the summertime, and maybe you have a hard time sleeping after the school year, and you decide that each night you're going to read one of the NIST documents, all very much technical. Never feel bad that you went home and read all those different things. You can go through there, but for you guys, vulnerability management comes down to tickets, logs, and the different tools that you have inside your, like the CISA Albert reports and the CISA. So your ITC is doing scanning through CISA on all your inbound and outbound traffic, and they create what's called an Albert report. And they get much more because they set the thresholds that all the ITCs we visit. They always set the thresholds so that you don't end up calling them like every 5 minutes, right? So Troy's back there. So when they set the thresholds, they do this like every SOC in the United States. They determine what, so that every email going in and out, every file that's going in and out, they're just like giving you an alert like every 5 minutes saying, hey, teacher X at IP address, blah, 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 sent this out. It looks suspicious. Because again, if you got, let's say 1,000 alerts a day, after a while, you wouldn't even open them up. You just ignore them. So alerting in the United States is based upon, we are alerted to what we consider to be critical. And that's where we're at throughout the entire. Banks are that way. You can listen to the radio and stuff like that, where they talk about, cyber and protections at your banking systems and stuff like that. And they'll talk about like, hey, somebody was trying to act like they were me. And then the number of banks have national commercials where they're saying, hey, our bank caught somebody trying to steal your money. So that's something critical, so alerts are just that. And then SIEM software, some of you, the ITCs And you get higher up, they have software that's in their system that is looking at traffic. Okay, and these are expensive. Sometimes those softwares can cost $100,000 a year. Sometimes they can be $60,000 a year. They're professional software programs so that they don't have to sit there and they just set the thresholds and then they're given alerts. The CISA is using Nessus and Nmap. It's looking for open ports and it's looking for whatever threshold, like, hey, we're broadcasting live. So Nessus is a big software package. Costs lots of money. And what they do, and they're just looking, and so the CISA part, we have a slide deck for that. We're going to go through it, but it's something that the ITCs are doing with school districts to do that. But in the end, which is the next slide, in the end, this is the magic. You could go in and say, hey, superintendent, I need you to read our vulnerability management plan. Treasurer, I need principals, the key people in your organization. I'm coming back from a seminar today, and we adopted this vulnerability management template, and we're turning it into our plan. Or you could say, here's the flow diagram. This flow diagram says everything that's in that plan. It says that there's this group called OME-RESA, and then if they're able to detect and they notify you as your ITC, the district will need to acknowledge the alert. Now, when I go into ITCs and I ask ITC managers, I said, how many times when you send out the alert do you get confirmation? They go like, hardly ever. I go like, well, we need to change that. If it's a critical alert, there needs to be a process where the school district acknowledges that we received a message that you got a computer in your school district broadcasting to Bulgaria. And it might not be you, it might be the superintendent. So this flow diagram goes to the top people in your organization. So I don't have to go around with this like, oh, what's my process? Here's a 12-page process and I got to read. So flow diagrams are used around the world in SOCs, those places that watch businesses and stuff like that. And it tells people where we're at. So what's in blue is the ITC. What is in green is the school district. And then the district technology team puts the report into the district's ticketing system. Now, if I come to your school system, which is, by the way, if you go and look on the vulnerability management, are you required to track a critical or a cybersecurity event? We'll just call it that. Are you required by the standard to track a cybersecurity event? Everybody go like that. Yes. So what's an event? Well, you guys are going to need to kind of like decide what is an event. Event isn't like little Johnny. The schools, so a student comes in and tells you they lost their Chromebook. A lot of you have Chromebooks at school, yes? So Johnny loses his Chromebook. Is that a cybersecurity event? Shake your head like this. No. No. Because can we even suspect that is it an event? Yes. You're going to put it, sell Johnny a new laptop and do all those things that are in your process. But Johnny doesn't have school data on his computer. If he does, we got bigger issues, right? If Johnny has the EMIS coordinator's information on his Chromebook, that's a problem. So we as a group, when we're doing cybersecurity, are going to say the student computers are public information. We treat it as a public computer, that they are doing reports about dinosaurs, they're doing math homework, they're doing research, they're writing papers, but they don't have any of your data that you told the superintendent you're going to protect on their computer system. But now teacher X in the music department comes in, maybe the music department head comes in and says, I lost my laptop. Do I have a cyber security event? The answer is yes. Because you have these things called FERPA. You have all these rules and regulations that says, oh, this is the person in my music department has between, maybe this person's all the way from middle school all the way up to high school. I've seen that in some school districts where the music instructor goes all the way down to middle school. So they can have 250 records, or they can have 500 records of student data on their laptop. It might not be actually sitting on their hard drive. It could be in their Google account. And so it becomes an event. And so that has to show up in your ticketing system. So if I went and looked at your ticketing system right now, do you have a category for cybersecurity events? Just go around, just add it. Just add it, good, yeah, good. So that way, because there's a control that we had that we showed earlier, one of the controls says, are you analyzing your cybersecurity events? Well, first of all, you got to track them. So what if the superintendent says, how many cybersecurity events did we have last year? So let's just pull down a number. Let's say,
25.
25. And so could a goal be for you this year to have 20? So because either you're going down or you're going up, chances of you hitting the same number. So, and then next year the superintendent says to you, okay, in 24, how many cybersecurity events did we have? And you come back and say, 18. Superintendent says, you're doing wonderful. We're on the downward trend. Surface attacks, we're obviously our security awareness training is working. Things are working. Things that are out of your control, obviously, because you got to get all those teachers not to put their laptop in the back seat of their car while they go grocery shopping, right? You don't need to create an event that's extreme just because we're being sloppy security awareness wise, right? So the thing is that the flow diagram is the way for you to communicate that whole process of, we're going to put it into our ticketing system. Now I can look at that. Let's say every month I meet with the superintendent and the treasurer, or once a quarter, and I say, this is how many we had last time. And are we on upward trend or are we on downward trend? If we're on upward trend, I'm going to say, hey, we did some more security awareness training, because you'll look, and then the superintendent, well, what's most of our trends were like? And you say, well, the individuals are losing their laptops, or they're dropping their laptops. We don't know what, you can look at the trends, but that's what analysis is. So you don't have to jump into logs yet, because maybe your big problem is that they just don't do very good taking care of their devices. They're not very secure with them. You don't know what the trends are until you start tracking them. It's the same way if you did want to control the Chromebooks, it's the same way. But training actually works for you on that way. Then, because this is analysis one, where all of a sudden somebody says, hey, I get an alert, in this case, it could be, I got an alert from ITC saying laptop, the last octet is 192, is broadcasting to Bulgaria. So I go in, I might just believe, because I know Jerry would never tell me the wrong information. So I go in and I say, I'm going to do containment. That's there. So analysis is, I read the message from Jerry and I'm going to go straight to containment. Now the teacher, when I go in there and disconnect their computer, they might be right in the middle of class. Now later on, when I tell the teacher, I said, how is it that your laptop, and only your laptop in my school district, is transmitting 2 megabytes of data to Bulgaria? Because last Father's Day, I was at a city, and it was a city worker who was shopping on their tax accounting device, clicked on a shopping ad, and uploaded inside less than 60, as fast as it can transmit over the fiber, 8 megabytes of text data to Eastern Europe before they went and unplugged the computer immediately. Say, hey, I got a problem on this text computer. But what was the employee doing right before that? Shopping on their city tax computer. Thought they were shopping, and you guys all know the story. They thought they were shopping, They were being phished. And they clicked the magical hyperlink and immediately put programs on their computer, and they immediately started uploading text data to Eastern Europe. Immediately. You should have seen their faces when I gave them a report that came out, from the Fusion Center and said, oh, by the way, you can never use that IP address octet ever again. You can never use that computer. You can't wipe that computer and ever use that. Now, this is a listing point. On sophisticated phishing attacks like this, you can't use that octet in your school ever again. You can't use the MAC address in other words, you can't wipe it because it knows the MAC address of the computer device. So as soon as you put a new hard drive in, then you know that that MAC address is owned by, let's pick on Port Charles, is owned by Charles. And so they're focusing, now it's no longer phishing, it's whaling, it's other, they know that I will shop, and so they can spot me by the MAC address and the IP address. So if all you did was wipe the hard drive and give it back to them, so if you ever read the reports on a text like that, if you just wipe the drive, give them a new drive, new image, then the perpetrator, the hacker, is back at that person again. They are marked for that IP address and that MAC address is that, so that computer has to leave the organization shredded. If you give it to another organization, like you sold it like at an auction, you just sold somebody a problem. So if you read the FBI reports, once you get hit on a certain device, and we know that was the entry point, that computer can never, that motherboard can never be used ever again. That IP address can never be used ever again. It is a known vulnerability inside your organization. That is the guidance from the FBI and CISA. So containment, eradication, that's easy. We can't do anything about the payload that went to Bulgaria. That becomes the lawyer's department problem. And then post-incident activity, this is all 800-61, which is all written out here. Detection, receiving the report, analysis, containment, eradication, recovery, post-incident. You guys saw that when we did incident response. Wow, vulnerability management is so close to incident response that what we learned 2 seminars ago, we're reinforcing today. That is the process. Detection, analysis, containment, eradication, recovery, post-incident. After a while, individuals, and if the superintendent says to me, because you're going to give this to them, they're going to hang it up in their wall in their office, because sometimes people don't report it to you, they report it to the principal. Something's happened weird on my computer. Get the 3 principals, put them in a room, and say, let's go through a couple scenarios today. If all of a sudden something starts happening weird to a machine, this is what I need you to do before I show up. When in doubt, turn the machine off. Now we know, and you all been around, it's like if you're right from forensic, if we turn the machine off, we lose all the forensic what's in memory. But then, you're gonna sit there and say, let's say you're at another building, you're at the middle school and it's at the high school. Are you willing to get over there an hour later, like we did at the city on Father's Day, and upload it 32 metadata out of the tax department before we decided to unplug it? So I would say, but the superintendent, the principals, and you need to sit down and say, here are some action plans that we need to do. Update update your flow diagram, because it's just a template. And if you want to change it and put some rules in there, or add an extra piece of paper in there, but I'm telling you what, people, I had individuals said, I'm going to take this diagram and put it in my incident response plan. I said, no, I want you to hang it on the wall. I want you to give it, because some of you have principals being your most senior IT people at the elementary school. I need to get people who are decision makers to understand, we got a vulnerability, where am I at? And they can write notes on it. Containment, unplug. What is containment? Unplug the Ethernet cable, turn off the computer. because if it's wireless, there's no cable, so you just turn it off. How many people have a plan like that at X right now? Their principals know, like, hey, I think I got a problem, and I'm gonna go in and turn that computer off right now. Even if the teacher is in the middle of a class, but we know that that device is infected, we're gonna turn it off like right now. And they have to go to plan B on their class lesson plan. Yeah, you do?
Well, I'd say we probably all have a plan, but I don't know if the teachers really follow that. Like, that's not solid that they have to do that. Like you said, in the middle class testing, and they think that's more important. They're not gonna follow
It
it.
is.
It's not reinforced.
Yeah. So it'll be training. So the more this document gets out and they understand. Now we have other action plans that will go in and when we get to seminar 4 and seminar 5, where some school districts have already done it to where they went in their school districts in Ohio and said, oh, by the way, everybody can't have any data files like spreadsheets downloaded like counselors. Because we would go into counselors' computers in the year 2000 and whatever, 21, and find that they had files on in their laptop or their Google, their folder that were from 12 years ago. And then we asked the legal department, the Eckler, and other legal ones, is that legal? And they came back and said, no. So you can imagine if you graduated from that school 20 years ago or 12 years ago, and then you got a letter in the mail that says, we breached your data. You go like, I graduated there 12 years ago. What in the world you got my data on the laptop? That's just document control. So the thing is so there's so that program is by which we'll cover in other seminars, when we go and we look at folder management, that the teachers at those school districts now sign a piece of paper that's on file with the school. It goes in the teacher's file that says every year that they've eradicated they get to the end of the school year and they took the data off from the previous school year. They can have their class plans on there, but all of a sudden they're on a field trip and they got the download of the emergency contact list for everybody that was on that field. That's how we get PII in the teacher's folder, by the way. You'll see these field trips and they give them the spreadsheet with all the emergency contact information on that PII, but they have all those spreadsheets on there for like the last 15 years. So we need to do better, not you, about communicating to the teachers, like, you got these old data files and we can always spot them. And so when we go in and we do a sample, we come into school and help you out, we do a sample, it doesn't take any time to find data files because we're not looking for class plans. We're looking for spreadsheets with the huge, that are big. They're like big. And it's because the school counselor gave them, they were on a team, they were looking at data, and that data from 7 years ago, and it's still in their folder. So when somebody gets their laptop, they have access to that data. You'll realize that most of your teachers, once they get in there, and we only have, let's say, 25% of the school districts in Ohio who have MFA. So basically, if the school teacher's laptop is stolen or their personal device is stolen, that they have on that device, once we get through their password, a character called my cat's name is Tiny or something like that, something simple. And and we bust in, we have access to not just what's on their hard drive. We click on their whatever, their PowerBook or whatever, and that, because all their passwords are stored in the system. So once we have access to the computer, and then this is the merry part of it. Once we get, because all of you, when you set up their laptops, it all has your admin password on it. So whoever the admin person was in your department, the image to drive, the admin password is on every one of the teacher's computers. It's also on the student's computers. The same one, in most cases, we find out it's the same password that's on the server. In other words, you image your endpoints with the same passwords that's for the server. So once I go in and we get a Chromebook from a student and we bust into that Chromebook through with software, just like cyber service does. So we're in that system in a day, just by getting a device. I also have a password for your server. It's the same password. The admin password for your setup is the same as what's in the data center. So how organizations do that. And so those are things we're going to do later on, like in seminar 4 about, how do we do that? It's just simple having different levels of passwords so that the endpoint setup is not the data center admin password. There's just little things like that that'll save you a lot of time. But if I steal a laptop, I get so much more information than you could ever believe that I can get, because the different people that touched it and stuff like that, and I get access to their Gmail account. So we see over here, those are so like in this one, we said it's 24 hours, 5 days, 14 days, 28 days, 7 days, 15 days, 30 days, 190 days. Whatever you do on your plan, then make sure your diagram, because that's because once you get your diagram done, which is in the downloaded material, you'll see that PowerPoint in there, or whatever format you wanted to do it in. Once you do it, get it, just, make a decision, talk through your ideas with your upper echelon principals and superintendents and such like that. Then you can go in and have a unified way on how to start doing vulnerability management. So it is appropriate at the beginning to have a plan. Then when we say, how often should we look at logs? Well, it's in the plan. So if we say we're going to look at logs once a month or once a year, well, we set it in our plan. It's not, so when the superintendent says, who told you that? Well, I said, well, I would say, hey, superintendent, for what you got for resources, I'm going to look at logs once a quarter. Whatever the number is. Put in your plan, brief the power to be, and let them know what the plan is. But try to put it into something like this. Give it to the superintendent, give it to the principals, so they can, and then when you hear a principal say, I did containment, I saw a problem, I did containment. And then if they start sounding like you, like they know the terminology, because they're going to have this in their office on their bulletin board. It's the plan. And you know what? Years ago, you might have had, let's say, 20 computers in your whole school district, right? Just in that one computer lab, or everybody went to that one lab. But today, every single student has technology. So you need the principals. You need these different people to understand what to do. They know what to do when there's a fire alarm. They need to know what to do when there's what they think is a technology problem. Because you're only one. I've been on the school districts where I've only had like maybe 1, 2, or 3 individuals, and the schools are spread out all over. You can't be like everywhere. You need to go and use diagrams like this, and you can expand on this diagram. So when you go in and we've had a number of school districts who've changed it around, put different colors in it. It's your diagram. It's a template. Okay, and I gave you the folder. So if I went into the folder and I opened up vulnerability management flowchart, and I'm going to let you guys take a break. I did this, and one school sent back and said, hey. So I had a school district on the west side of Ohio that says, hey, what happens if it's just inside our school and it's not with the ITC? And so they said, so they did this one where they pulled out the ITC stuff and just did the school one. It's your idea. But the thing is that if you get it to where it's a picture, most Americans do it. Because you can have it, put them up on their bulletin board, it can be on their wall. And you say, and then they'll go, and then of course, once you put in like, this is what we're going to do for containment. So you would say, action to stop the spread of the incident. When you look at the people that are on your team, you say, that is you turning this machine off. So sometimes you have to say it in English, because this is IT speak. And I left it that way. But when you go out to your school, if you say contain is turning the computer off, I would change it to say turn the computer off. That's how you contain. And it is true. You turn a server off, you turn a switch off, you turn the camera off, you contained it. And then you say, and if you want to say, turn it off, call me, or whatever, in other words. And then you'll see whether your flow diagram is working at your school district. You'll see. And you'll see whether we're increasing or we're decreasing. So at the beginning of the planning is, are our vulnerabilities increasing? Are we decreasing? And how many people inside my organization, just like we did with the data flows, can I get them to help be my frontline technicians? And believe it or not, eventually your teachers will become frontline. Because once, they always say, I will watch this TED talk, and they say once 33%, enough of them start doing it, then it becomes a popular thing to do. So once you get the majority or a big block of teachers and teachers' assistants to start doing certain things, and you start seeing this diagram at the teacher in the classroom, then you win. Because now you actually have a whole bunch of people out there helping you. And they're starting to sound like you do about password control, not putting your passwords underneath the keyboard, all those other little things, once they start to sound like you, and sometimes if they're doing something like that and you're out in the hallway and they're talking about cybersecurity, let's say in the first 5 minutes, let's say you convince them to talk about cybersecurity with their class for the first 2 minutes every day. Like you have one student, Johnny, Sally, Deborah, whoever, open up the internet and read off who got breached in Cambridge area or in Eastern Ohio. And they read it and then they know, well, this is not New York. This is not whatever. This is like right here in Ohio. Then it becomes real. It's like, oh, okay. That's why I need to do that. You could say, I want to talk about breaches. I want to talk about somebody got their credit card number stolen, because even kids in high school have credit cards or debit cards. And if they know that it's happening, then it's something that they can do. I guarantee you, when they go out to work for Huntington Bank, Kroger, GE, you would not, if you don't, but I support every big Fortune 500 company practically in North America. You would not believe what an employee has to do to meet the cybersecurity requirements at work today. You just would not believe it. If you haven't talked to a friend that says, like, how severe is it at a company? I was talking to a software programmer the other day, and he says we have to basically go through 10 minutes of interfaces just to get to our code today. And just in the last 60 days. So you can imagine if you told a teacher that they had to work for 10 minutes to get access to their class plan on Google. And the reason is because right now, ever since the United States has been in the Mediterranean, we've seen an uptick of 10 to 15 times of the attacks in the state of Ohio. And I could go in and list, I actually have a list on my computer of all the cyber attacks in Ohio in the last 60 days. And it's gone up 10 to 15 times. And it's going to go higher. So the federal government, because we are in that part of the world, people don't want us to be in that part of the world, and they can't attack a U.S. aircraft carrier. So they attack the United States in the form of cyber attacks. And you've read about them. I mean, you can read about all the school districts. So we had a week where we had 4 schools get hit. 1 week. Never done that before. December on December and January, it was reported as the most number of cyber attacks in the United States in the history of the internet. I haven't seen February's report yet. So all this stuff is going on. Now, I don't want you to go home and get all nervous and stuff like that, because let's say we lose or we get confirmed 100 attacks we have 14,500 critical infrastructure. So 100 doesn't even make a percentage. So we're not like getting killed. It's just an increase in number of attacks. Okay, cool. All right, I'll stop here, and we're going to be doing this here and other ones. And so, but we'll take questions. So if you notice, all this text that's in there, all text is good. Should read it sometime, but other than that, I'm a big person on here's a graphic, and every school that has distributed that flow diagram, changed it to their school, how they're going to do things, and they distribute it. All those schools have come back with very positive comments about how people felt that they, I'm not telling you, a picture is better than giving them a 20-page plan. And you can modify it. You can take your emblem of your school district and embed it in behind. So if you're the Lions or if you're the Bears or something like that, you can schoolify it even more to make it look like it belongs up on the screen. It could be, so if you're the Bears, it could be the Bears cybersecurity plan. And then you got it like all over the place. What questions we got? We got any questions in Philly? It says, so you are aware we do DESIS professional scans. I'm reading this from Jerry. Once per month for each district. These are internal scans. We do CISA external scans that happen once per week. We open tickets for the tech folks in each instance. So Jerry's got tickets. Just make sure you have tickets too. We use them to do them, and a server issue get fixed, and he has dates on there. So if you look in the chat, he's giving you guidance. Okay, cool. Anybody else had any questions? So out of here today, so far we're going to do flow diagrams back at our schools. We're going to adopt the vulnerability plan. And you'll sit there, so if you do have that, of course, the FBI is always there the second day, even at Groveport over here in Columbus. And I was talking to them, and the FBI was there on day 2. It's typically day 2, and they'll be there as long as you need them. And they're not there to do anything. They're there to help you, because they'll tell you exactly, oh, that's such and such, they have access to federal resources, so they will find out exactly which gang, the cyber gang, has hit you. And they will get you that information, so you will like working with them. We work with them a lot, like when we're out on our training in the summertime, when we're training the whole unit, and then there'll be the FBI will be there for the training and interfacing. Do you have a question? All right. So are you pulling up the questions up there?
Well, I'm trying to.
So should we be able to hear them?
Well, that's what we're trying to find out. Why we can't hear them.
Yeah. See if I can read the. So we have to go in and write down their names and other people. So what's the question, Jerry?
Charles, can you hear us?
Okay, now I can hear you.
All right, we're working. Sorry, we are working on getting the microphone in the room working.
That's okay. We can hear you now.
Yeah, but it's really loud when I talk here.
So what was the question?
The question was, what is the extent a device should be recycled or end of life? If you want to come up and read,
Yeah.
he's going to come up and ask his questions.
Yeah, so we distribute to you an end of life plan in seminar 5, but it came up today. So we can always give you those answers earlier. So so if it's a public device, like a student device, like a Chromebook, then if you read this 800-88 R1, it'll tell you you can overwrite that with any override software. Now it needs to be a certified software that you can verify. In other words, you should do a sample. Let's say you wiped 100 devices. You have to show, even if you're doing it yourself, you have to show that that you did some sort of sampling. Now,
Oh,
I think
sorry to interrupt you, Charles. This is Bill. My question, it wasn't as far as like retiring a device that's in use. It was, you'd mentioned that the FBI had recommended if a device was the source of an incident,
Mhm.
that we retire the MAC address. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, I can.
Oh, okay. We would retire the MAC address and the IP. I mean, obviously, we can't retire every device that gets like a real tiny virus. So I was just curious
Yeah,
to what extent you guys recommend retiring a device. I mean, would it be once you guys let us know or once OME-RESA would let us know if, we were sending a ton of data outside or what?
yeah. So it's usually only the computer. So when we've seen that, like the one that was in the city, it was just the person's device, or it's a server. Like if you're at Groveport and it's the one server that they actually got in there. So let's say they took that server, kept the server, and just went in and re-imaged the hard drives and then put that server back into use. On not every single phishing attack or every single software, but a lot of them that are modern will pick up the IP address and the MAC address. And so you'll get a report from the Fusion Center that says, here's the action items, and CyberZor will give you that same level report too. Here's what we know that is compromised. And in most cases, those reports will say that the MAC address of the server has now been compromised, so that if we put something in there that's new, they already know that you have a certain server that has been vulnerable. So then that hacking agent group over in Eastern Europe or Asia will go straight back and try to hit on that server. Now you could have it hardened now to where it's impossible for them to get through. So then the guidance from CISA is going to, for that, and they have it for all the different types of attacks, and they'll say, but it's not 100% across the board. So we don't have any. I've never gone into where we have to get rid of all the computers. It's usually just the entry point machine that was the point to where that was the machine that was transmitting the data up and uploading it. And so so in our report, we would give to the organization, say, this one machine needs to be removed and recycled. So I've never seen more than one machine on that report. So it's not detrimental. And then the head of the report, if they're running, let's say, a Class B network or Class A network, they got a ton of IP addresses, so that the not use of that IP address doesn't become an issue. So we basically, just like a college athlete, we retire the IP address in that organization, and then the MAC address, which stays with every device. For all those individuals, remember your A+ training, your MAC address is unique for each device and in the whole world. So that MAC address gets removed forever. If you resold it to somebody, let's say like an auction block, then that person would have a machine that the hacker would use self-discovery tools to look for that MAC address over the internet. And the tools on the internet are sophisticated enough that they can search for a MAC address over the internet to see if it'll answer up. So yes, so usually and so when we destroy that, so that machine eventually, they'll typically bag the hard drive. So on a machine like that, because it'll go to the Fusion Center, whether federal or state, the state federal Fusion Center starts up in the summertime. So starting in the summertime, the state of Ohio will have a Fusion Center, and then the school would bag the hard drive, and then they could either send that in there if they have the ability. The Cyber Reserve has tools to where we can make a complete copy of it and then send that to the, and then actually have a forensic analysis. What we've seen in Ohio is that most forensics is being done by labs, and but the state of Ohio is committed to have a Fusion Center that all critical infrastructure can use. And it's supposed to be up this summer of 24. So as soon as we get that out, we'll get it out to the ITCs and ESCs so you can distribute that to the districts. So with a process on if they had a device and it was a suspicious one, a containment, that they can send the drive to the Fusion Center in Columbus, Ohio, and then they would receive an analysis report of anything that was on that drive. Very professional.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we have been going at this. Do we we can take a couple minute break if you want to take a break now, and then we get into zipping through the other ones, which is with taps in. So do we need to take a break there, Jerry?
Yeah, a few minutes wouldn't hurt.
Yeah. So we'll come back up at 11 o'clock, and then people can get refilled their coffee. So it's 10:46 right now. So that gives us about 13 minutes for a break. And then I'll get Troy to do a roster.
Seen you a long time. Bring me to Taco Bell.
So we have 6 here, Jerry.
Good, how are you?
Waiting for all this new project to get finished.
What's that?
Waiting for our new construction to get
I
finished.
drove by the other day and saw old equipment. Finally got some buildings, like walls going up and all.
Yeah, we're supposed to be, K5 is supposed to be on in January.
Oh, really?
Move over, new date.
Yeah,
And then the rest of next year, but 26.
gotcha.
Like summer 26, and everything's supposed to be done.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was coming back from Woodfield, running past there, heading to Walmart to charge my car. About a month or so ago.
Okay.
Saw the progress. I'm glad we're not doing any major, we have some small projects, building projects running, but nothing crazy like that, so.
It'll be, hopefully it'll be all right once it's done.
Right.
Get some new stuff, new wire and new everything.
Right. My only recommendation is you stay as involved as you can.
Well, I've tried and it's not working.
It's hard, yeah.
Yeah.
I've had to force my way in a few times to get
Yeah,
it.
they don't like the tech consultants and the architect, they don't like it very well.
Yeah.
I'm the only person asking questions. I don't know, if I was maintenance, I'd be asking you what kind of order and brick and everything.
Right.
I'm picking everything.
Right.
So,
I'm just on our way here, we had to stop there, they were renovating our CDL classroom, that new facility we bought. And the plan was terrible. Like we're supposed to, like, all our classrooms are like a media cabinet up on the wall where the junk goes in. All the ports are at the floor level. We're supposed to be in the classroom in 2 weeks and, yeah, they gotta redo that whole wall.
all of ours is coming from the state design manual, they call it. Like, who made that? 'Cause it's awful.
Right,
It's not right.
yeah, that's it.
So there's a state design manual or
There's like standards, yeah.
They call it design manual, for FCC at least.
If you take OFCC money, you're supposed to use like mostly their standards or
Pretty much,
things.
So, yeah.
So that whole project was done before I came on, when they renovated both campuses,
Right.
before I came on board, so I don't have to deal with that.
Like they asked, dumb question, you need wireless switches, of course you do. They went on, good at worded it without me doing anything past that.
Yeah.
Like, your whole standards are awful. Our video system is, currently use X, I've never used it, never had it. That's what they just use the design standard.
Yeah,
I don't know what else to say, it's no,
it's,
that's not it. Yeah.
sometimes, yeah, you just gotta get it more on you with those projects.
Yep.
We have milestone, we came into our project, we like, it's not bad.
That's what they quoted, yeah, they said we had a milestone, we never had it. So, digital watchdog, which a lot of other people use, it's a white label, NX witness.
Right.
So I need to look at milestone, see how software works.
Yeah.
Or is that
Pretty simple.
Yeah.
You want something to you, time, one point, or
Yeah.
give me a call, I can
You use it, so. All right.
it's not hard.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna have to leave.
oh yeah.
I've been blowing
No, I
up.
just got Jerry wanted me to make sure I got the names of everybody's here. So
Internet issues, now they're saying phones at one building off.
Uh-oh.
Fantastic.
When it rains, it pours.
I'm sure it's not a security incident, just.
All right, first name,
James.
last name,
Bucky.
Buckuy. And your school again?
Rolling Hills.
Okay, good. I got it, and I'll send that to Jerry, so you know people here.
Yeah.
And then, if you got a piece of paper, I can write down, my web address or my email address if you want.
I do not. Man, I thought you
There you go. Robin. And anytime you need anything, no big deal. There you go. And, you say, hey, I need this. And then, usually I try to answer those emails like every day. If I'm on mission like today, then I'll get to it the next day. But by the time I get to the weekend, I'll go in on the weekend and I'll see all my backlog.
Right.
And then send out stuff people are requesting. Anything else save you time?
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
it's nice to meet you.
You too.
What's your first name?
My name is Rick Hogan.
Rick Hogan. And what school district?
Mid-East Career Center.
East.
And then the guy that sits beside me is Aaron Wetland. He's from the same district.
Aaron. And what's his last name?
Winland, W-I-N-L-A-N-D.
And Mid-East, right?
Yep.
Career Center.
Correct.
Cool. Yeah, the county, I was looking at the county plan and they were like, well, we want to do everything virtual. Which is fine. I mean, it's a virtual world, but, as we make these contacts and then when people like show up from the cyber reserve, and it'll probably be somebody different than me, like they'll come to your career center, but at least, you'll hear the same thing and it's like, and then you say, because anytime a person comes in and says, well, we're going to go in and look at your systems and stuff like that, then it's like, it's like, people go like, if all it is an email, then you got stuff in your head, like, how's that going to be?
Right.
So yeah, it's just better at the first phase. Eventually it can be 100% virtual or a lot of virtual at the end, but at the beginning of the process, if you take out the human element, then how do people trust the organization? If all you do is it's just like somebody, let's say somebody from the federal government send you emails and stuff like that. And then eventually, and I really worked hard, but I was telling Troy that we had missions and we had a lot of missions this week. So it's pretty typical that we do like 5 missions in Ohio because like we're supporting like Toledo and Cincinnati. Like tomorrow we have a team in Cincinnati, we have a team in Toledo today. And so So, but so typically, especially by the time seminar 1 and 2, you can do with one. But typically on a seminar today, usually we have like 2 or 3 people. But when we have this is a heavy mission week for us. So yesterday there was we had a team that showed up to CIS, but then they had the tornado, they had to reschedule because of the tornado in the county. So we had the Eager Beaver Cyber Reservists showing up. They were there at 6 o'clock, going to be ready to go to work at 7. And then the schools could say, I'm like, man, we got a 2-hour delay, right? It's like, can we reschedule this? So, but I mean, that's reality too. So, right. And you are?
Taryn, T-E-R-E-N.
T-E-R-R. E-E-R-R.
Ian.
And Tara, what's your last name?
H-U-C-K.
And where are you from?
Caldwell, Exempted Village School District.
What is it called?
Caldwell, Exempted Village School District.
Caldwell.
Or just Caldwell School District, fine.
Like C-A-L-D-W-E-L.
Yes.
I'll send it over to
Honestly, right before I came in here, I was like, I don't know if I even signed up for this one. I think
That's okay. That's all right.
I was here, so whatever. They can tell me to leave if they want.
All you can say, I'm critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, so I was supervising teams that go in and work in the data center in my civilian job, and I'm vice president of engineering, and then I every once in a while, but I was being in the military for years and years, I had letters. So when they would be like driving down the road, every once in a while they get stopped by somebody remember when everything was locked down? They pull out the letter, and then that letter says, I work for this company, we support these data centers. I says, it's like hospitals. Hospital workers had to go to work, and then, but you can see because they have scrubs on, but somebody's driving down the road and somebody, like there was a county inspector who was like, why is your company open? And then they came in, and you're like, well, I says, who's going to take care of all these data centers? But as soon as the governor announced it, we went through the process because you had to notify the state, but they didn't disseminate that information out to the highway patrol or nobody like that. It's like, but in Ohio, people know more about critical infrastructure today because of COVID, and they found out just sending students home doesn't work, because some people would have argued, even I did, like, our school's part of critical infrastructure. And so every time I get that question, I have a JAG lawyer. I'll send an organization. The very first time I talked to an ITC, I said, and I sent it to the JAG. I said, are they part of critical infrastructure? And yeah, he comes back like 5 seconds later. Yes, Charles, they are critical infrastructure. But at that time, 4 years ago, the state didn't even have a list.
Was considered.
Yeah, I'm sitting there going like, well, don't you think, somebody up there getting paid a lot of money, you should make a list, or at least say, here's the categories. And that's still everyone, it doesn't come up as much as anymore, but it did for a while. It's like, what is critical? Because, obviously if it's a government entity, that was easy. Fire departments is easy. But every once in a while we get. Now, the other one that comes up that the JAG told us, we send you a vulnerability plan. And then when you ask your vendors, let's say you have a favorite local vendor in this part of town, and over time that they're going to have to become compliant. So if you look in the standard, New York passed a law called Part 121 and 121.9 that says all 800 school districts in New York have to be this compliant. Wow. But they did it kind of goofy. They didn't create a cyber reserve. They just told everybody, oh, you got to do this, because it's, you write a law, and of course you're all going to obey the law, right? So when I found out about it this last summer, because the auditor of the state of New York went and audited all the schools, and nobody did it because they didn't tell the schools. They passed a law, but they didn't do the communication part. So yeah, kind of crazy. You can't just pass something that's buried in some law and expect everybody in that state to know that you just changed the law.
Hey, Charles,
Hey, what's up?
do you work with General Williams,
I
Terry
don't,
Williams? Okay.
but I've been in this, she's the head of CISA in Ohio.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I used-
Karen Williams.
Yeah, she used to be my boss in the National Guard, so.
Yeah. So, yeah, so I saw her 3 years ago, and I was on a seminar with her when she was down doing a thing in Cincinnati on cyber. So every once in a while I run into her, but I run into almost all the other agencies. But Taryn keeps pretty busy going, I'm sorry, Brigadier General Williams keeps pretty busy, running around Ohio, doing things just like we are, seminars, getting everybody, up to speed.
Yeah, I don't think she ever sits still.
No, Cyber Reserve doesn't. So Cyber Reserve had 5 missions this week. So, and then we have training in Cincinnati this weekend. So, our schedule, we're like the busiest reserve unit but at the same time, and I'm about ready to, so let's say a person who's an ITC, an ESC, or a school district, they join the Cyber Reserve, they would have access to the level training that I get, which is huge. And their commitment is just to be with their unit on a Saturday once, if they're available a month, because it's a volunteer force. So I keep on thinking, like, because I have a challenge, as we talked about before, like how do we get more people in Athens, Eastern Ohio, like Cambridge, Steubenville? So if a person joined the Cyber Reserve and said, hey, my commitment is be a cyber reservist, but I'm really just going to be supporting my school district, which is, okay, got it. So they're not going to be, and if I knew that ahead of time, then I would make sure, okay, that's their assignment. But now they have access to all the training that I have access to, which is big bucks, big money. So we get training that the kind of training you would expect a military cyber person to get access to. And now we're working like crazy right now once we do the 5 seminars, the next I think 4 seminars, which I'm going to do up at Brainstorm this year, is to give all your school districts the whole plan on how to do instant response. But anyway, there's all kinds of things that we got in the plan, but everything we're trying in Ohio, we got to get down because I got 20 other states that want to do the same thing. So I just got to make sure that I want to give something to another state that is still in a kind of a pilot mode. What we're doing with you guys is way past the pilot mode, and where we use what we're doing with the ITCs with the counties. So the county one, LPCI just started. And so we're just starting to get notifications for the counties, and then everything we've just been doing the last 2.5 years with you, with the ITCs and all your school districts, then the counties, all the critical infrastructure are going there. If your school gets contacted by a county that says, hey, you need to go through this training, then they just need to respond like, hey, we already did it through the ITC. So all important stuff. All right, back to training. Everybody got more coffee, water, everybody looks good. Oh, looks good, good. So we talked about the cyber hygiene program. I'm not going to do that, but I have the slide deck in there, and I'm just going to run through it real fast, but I put it in there. I did not make this slide deck. This was made by CISA. And then Jerry put the stuff out there talking about the nitty gritty of like how he's doing it, and he's sending you reports. And so CISA is, in the federal government, is doing what they can to provide tools to critical infrastructure that, let's say, maybe a private industry doesn't have. And so there's this nest. So you can just put this in your knowledge base somewhere, but every ITC I run into, they're already utilizing this program. They started doing it a couple years ago. And so they're doing those scans for you. So you can get an Albert report And it's most likely, they'll get the official report looking like, and what you might get is an email message that says, hey, IP address such and such is squawking, beaconing to the rest of the world. So that's in there, so you already know, and I put your slide in there. The most important is, so you could be on vacation, or you could be like at a seminar for a couple of days, and then the superintendent there says, hey, I got an outward report about IP address such and such. Now, they probably, unless you have a matrix map where your IP address says, oh, that IP address is Mrs. Smith's class. So you might have to get a little bit granular, or you look up on your computer and you're at the conference in Columbus, and so you email back to Cambridge or Viceville, and you say, oh, that's Mrs. Smith's computer. Just turn it off and give her a spare. How many of you have like a spare computer that's available for a teacher with a different IP address if they need to use it? So those are type of things that you can do. So anyway, this is in your packet. It's just there. When you run into individuals from another state and they say, what do I do? And they might not, believe it or not every state has ITCs. Did you know that? I found that out. Not everybody has an infrastructure. So each individual school in the United States can go in and contact CISA and set this up. So if you have a friend who's in Oregon and they hear about all the cool things you're doing, you say, so you're talking back and forth, and you know how you're going to talk about vulnerability management with them this weekend, right? Yeah, I get no chuckles with that. So you're talking about vulnerability management with your best friend from Oregon, and then and we get this all the time. We get emails from outside the state of Ohio, and this is one of those things. You say, hey, I'm going to send you this PowerPoint. You at your school, if you guys don't have this in your state, if you don't have a cool ITC, if you don't have a Jerry in front of you doing this for you and Troy, then what you need to do is you can, from your school district, go straight to CISA and sign up for the program. So you can tell other people you know that you went to college with or friends that if they're critical infrastructure, this is available to them. Okay, cool. Excellent. And that's the only reason I put it in there. But you guys are already doing it. We already talked about it. Let's go to the next one. Next one is we're going to do the TAP next. We'll do logs. So I'm going to talk a little bit about TAPs. So when a cyber reserve or a cyber insurance company comes to you and does analysis, they're going to ask you, do you have a TAP on inside your network? Okay. And you just heard what Jerry was talking about doing analysis and with the CISA, Nessus, and now. So a TAP is a new device, a newer device that replaces what's called a spanner port or spam port. And what it does is if you have a TAP on your system at your school, and so it is an investment, but if we come to your school district and there's a problem, that very first day, we're going to ask you as a cyber reserve, can we put a TAP on your network? Okay. If the FBI comes there, the cybersecurity insurance company, we're going to ask the cybersecurity professionals will say, can we go in? Basically, we're going to put a listening device on your network. That's what a TAP is. It doesn't slow your network down because it's fiber optic. And so it just watches the light pulses go by and it just copies it. And then we're sending those in what's called a PCAP over. We're either going to stream it or we're going to put it in the individual PCAP file. And we're going to read all the data wherever we put a TAP on your network. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. The perpetrator can't see us. So when there's a TAP put on your network, they can't tell that we're reading what they're doing. So we're undetectable. So what is a TAP? For us, we have wire taps like for Ethernet cable, and then we have fiber taps. And then we're going to ask you when we come to your organization, and then we're also saying, like, if you had a TAP already in your network, that means you don't have to be always dependent on Jerry and Troy you could actually do your own PCAPs whenever you want to. Pretty darn interesting. And you might not want to do that. It might be something like, hey, we'll get there in a couple of years. But one is, we're going to tell you about it. So, because remember, when we come responding to an incident and you call out the cyber reserve to your school, you just know, and you're all listening, I know you are. So we're going to ask you on day one, can we put a tap? You could say no, because it's your network. But we're going to say, hey, we need to do that so we can do analysis. Okay, cool. And we just talked about a span port will slow your system down. A tap doesn't affect your speed at all. Okay? And we have every kind of tap, single mode, multi-mode. We come in, we're like doctors. We have all of our own cool stuff. When we go, oh, by the way, when we come, remember we talked about that with incident response. We're coming with a 10-person team. So if you gave us a room that looked like this, but I guess you could make us work in a closet, but it would be better if we had a room with tables and room for 10. So yeah. So we want to have access to your network traffic, but we can put the tap anywhere we really need to be. And then we do, so you can see in this graphic here, you have the internet and you have a computer, and then we have our analytics device. And that's what cyber, so we are, so a typical cyber reserve team, 2 leaders, a team leader, a deputy leader, and then 8 SMEs, what they call subject matter experts, but you can call them analysts. And they specialize, they usually have cross specialties, but so if they're there, they can do forensics for you. They can do all kinds of stuff for you, just like the FBI. So when we put a tap in, we will show you where we want to put it. And if we want to put multiple taps in, we will say this, we're not going to just not tell you anything, because remember, when we disconnect the fiber, it takes about 10 seconds to put a tap in. But when we do it, remember, we'll unplug that cable and then plug it in so it passes through the tap. So, but it does disconnect the network just for a short time. When we do a vulnerability management mission, which we do, so after you do a NIST mission with us, and then you say after, like, hey, can you guys come back in 90 days and do a baseline? How many people have heard the word baseline before? Baseline is like, it's Monday through Friday, and we want to know, what is normal operations looking like on your network, so we can determine where to set alerts at. So we do what's called a baseline. Now, at the same time, when we do the baseline, where we have a tap on your network, we're also going to determine, we're going to see all your open, we're going to see everything. We're going to see open ports. We're going to see that Mrs. Smith's computer on a regular basis every Thursday sends a packet of, a bunch of data, beacons to Bulgaria. So we typically like to do a vulnerability management mission in anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks, and we collect a whole bunch of data, and then it just comes in. It's not like we don't have to ask you a bunch of questions. We let the computer read all the data, and then we put it through a computer program, and we come out with this whole report and says, this is what we see. Well, this is what the computer sees is wrong with your network. It's great. When do you do that? The order is, you do the NIST thing like what we're doing right now. You get it as close as you can get it. Passive vulnerability management. Past that, and then of course you guys have heard the word pen test, right? So why do you think you want to use a pen test on your network eventually?
Try to find any open holes.
Open holes. Like, hey, there's a vulnerability on my web server, or the web server that some company put in for me. And so, most times we're going to find that vulnerability with the passive test. So once you do all those surface hardening, passive vulnerability, then the cyber reserve will come in and say, okay, let's do a pen test. And they cost a lot of money, but the state's really pushing hard for the cyber reserve. So they're writing SOP right now. It's the last mission that we're getting ready for. But by the time you guys are ready for it, the cyber reserve will come in. And you do not want to hit an unprepared network with a pen test, because it is a cyber attack on you're asking them to be cyber attacked. And it can leave equipment damaged, like software, not the hardware. So you would never take a poorly built network and hit it with a pen test, unless you just don't want to have things that used to work on Friday over the weekend, and you come back Monday and something's not working. Okay. So the thing is, because if there is a vulnerability, it will exploit that vulnerability. So, and then and hurt that one server to where maybe some teacher can't use that server system on Monday. So taps are involved. Typically when we put them in, if your school orders a tap, it will do it on off hours. So like if you wanted to do a test, we would put a tap in and then have a Synology in there and in the tap, and we would collect data. And you say, hey, let's do it for 2 weeks the first time. A lot of times, if I'm there and I'm at your school district, I will take, because I'll be there for the day, setting up and make sure everything's running perfectly. And I'll actually do a short report at the beginning and say, hey, and then I'll tell you like almost right away, like, you know, because it takes about maybe 30 minutes to get the first analytics reports off of the network. And then I'll say, oh, here's all the problems you got that are obvious. So we use automated tools that are open source. We use Security Onion. We use all kinds of tools to help us do this stuff. So it's great. Down the road, once you put a tap in, and if you invest in a tap at your school, and then when we go to this next phase, after we get done with the 5 seminars, we will, at our expense, train you how to use all these different SIEM softwares, and then you can go in and do your own baseline, things like that. Most people are going to say, just like the logs, I don't have time to do that, Charles. So there are tools that are free that can just go in and run 24/7, just like the Nessus, and then you can set them up to just go ahead and say, hey, I get a report. So right now you're dependent on Jerry, like that ITC is doing that, and the ESCs, but we just need to make sure that we are we're going to be learning. And then especially when you think you have a problem, let's say you had that was set up and you had it to where you had a SIEM program there and you're reading the stuff, and Jerry gave you a CISA alert, or you got the alert through your own system, and and the superintendent asks you like, what happened? And you could say, you can go back to your program, you can go over to your computer and look at that and say, oh, between 11:10 and 11:13, we uploaded 16 megabytes of data to this IP address, which that IP address is in Iran. So that's what a tap gets you. Tap starts getting to a point to where you're monitoring inside your own network. Right now, you have the ITCs monitoring inbound and outbound. So do you meet the criteria for the standard? And the answer is yes. If you went into a NIST evaluation and they said, do you have a monitoring tool? You would say, I have Jerry and ITC OME-RESA. That's my monitoring. And you meet the criteria. So if it's a cyber insurance company, but I have seen some cyber insurance companies say, do you have local monitoring? I would say, hey, I'm going to put a tap in. So there's plenty of companies that insure you without doing that. I think I had a price list in here. Maybe I took that out. Oh, here it is. So Dwayne Powell, who's one of the regional managers in Central Ohio, and I put this in here. And he told me, he said, if you were going to budget and purchase a fiber tap, if you're fiber optics, if you're copper coming in, it's actually more expensive, but that number is super high. So I used to have the actual price that what the cyber reserve pays for our taps. So if you were going to put a single tap on inside your network right before you're going outbound or something like that, and you budgeted $1,600, and then but I think at one time I had it like at $800 because I think the tap is only like $375. But this is what Dwayne, who is a CISO at a city in Ohio, he says, Charles, put a higher number in there. So that when they budget for it, that they have more, so that if they need a certain tap, that you put a number in there that, so $1,600 for a fiber tap that for a single installation. And what that gets you, and then the thing is that tap would be good forever until you change out your fiber someday.
Somebody asked the question, is that a one-time cost or is
One time.
it popped up on the bottom there?
Yeah, thanks. So it's a one-time cost. So you don't need it to be compliant because the CISA system is keeping you in compliance. Somebody asks you, do you have vulnerability management? You say, yeah, I learned about, Jerry told us about, if we have it, it will spot in his monitoring system and he alerts you. If you want a more real-time system at your school district, and this would be like a superintendent comes up and says, hey, I've been reading about this. I'm thinking about using a real-time monitoring system. You say like, well, we're gonna have to put a tap in. And then you would go in and say, hey, that if it was like 3 years down the road, you say, hey, Charles, can you look up the current price? Because we buy taps in the cyber reserve. We have a whole room. So we have all the different types of taps for all these different types of equipment. So that when we go on site, we have, each team is carrying enough equipment to do a few taps. And then put them in there. And then they all go to training on how to put them in. So Cyber Reserve could help you put those in. Your ITC, if you're putting one in and different people want to watch you do it, you want to videotape it, and stuff like that. But it takes a whole whopping 30 seconds. I mean, if you have to have all your equipment there because you're just wherever you're doing it, you're disconnecting that line, you're feeding it in there, and then you put the extra cable and bring it back in. So it's just basically feeding through. It's a feed through. And that's what a tap is. And we're gonna, and the other time it's gonna come up is if you get hit, your cybersecurity insurance company, the FBI, or the Cyber Reserve, if they're trying to help you out, they'll say, hey, can we put a tap in there? And you say, yeah, I remember I sat through a tap class with Charles. And there's all kind of strategies. Your one is just to put a basic tap inside the DMZ or on outside of the DMZ. Most of you, a lot of you have your data. Some of you have data centers. Some of your data centers are out at the ITC. So if you just have traffic that's coming into like a centralized point, then we would just want the sweet spot is the monitor right there where all the traffic is coming in and out all the time. Once you do that, the next class we're going to look at is where we're going to sit there and talk about softwares that look at data. We're going to do that next. Anybody have any questions about what a tap is? The Cyber Reserve, if you're going to put one in, the Cyber Reserve is more than skilled to help you put taps in. And it's a one-time cost. It's probably not hot on your list to do because you already have something right now that meets the criteria with CISA and the NESA scan. But down the road, a year from now, you probably, after you go and when you get access to the cyber range and you're going to see how to read PCAPs and how easy it is, you'll be saying like, oh, it's time for us to do tap. And most people tell me that, if it turns out to be $975, you guys are going to put it on the school credit card, it's not going to, compared to all the other expenditures you guys got, probably $900 or $1,000 is one-time cost isn't going to be the worst thing. The worst, I have seen organizations like cities who buy monitoring and then nobody looks at the report. It's like logs. So they pay $80,000 for this really expensive system and then nobody looks at it. So, and they pay $80,000 like every year. It's a recurring cost. So when they buy a monitoring system, why would you do that if you're never going to look at the information?
How different is a tap from, say, like a program called Wireshark?
Wireshark is that's what we're in next class.
Okay.
Yeah. So these are tools that we're going to use. So in the Cyber Reserve, so when we get to those next classes, and you have somebody on your team, you say, hey, I'm going to be the analyst. I'm going to look at a PCAP. So there's a different, if I'm using like a Grafana package, it's just going to stream data and then I'm going to get, I'm going to get packets. So in the end, we're going to do packet analysis. So the next class is about analyzing PCAPs, which is what you're getting from the tab. So the cyber reserve, all cyber reservers are experts at this. There's no way you're not gonna, so constantly we get exposed to PCAPs on missions and in training to where we get what looks like a bunch of hexadecimal data. And then we, just like the Enigma, we have to figure out what is in there and then do the analyzing. And there are tools that I have in a matrix right here for you that are now most of the cyber reservists, they like to use Security Onion, which has literally hundreds of things for them to do with. But if you're at the beginning, when a new cyber reservist comes in, we use Grass Marlin Network Miner, we use Zeek with RESA, and T-Sharp and Wireshark. They're all open source, which means they don't cost you a dime to use them. Okay. So when the superintendent says, well, how much does the network miner cost? And you say nothing. How much does Wireshark cost? And you say nothing. Okay. So the thing is if I had a tap in there and I had a computer sitting over collecting PCAPs for me, I could do a baseline. And I could say, now at the beginning, if you said you baseline once a year or twice a year, and then you sat down on the weekend and you say, Charles, I don't do this every day. You got to come and hang out with me on a Saturday or on a Friday afternoon. And then we would sit there and do the analytics together. But I have the process on how to do the analytics all written down. So if I get a brand new cyber reservist who's never done it before, I give them the entire process and it's just like, and they run through it. So they get the PCAP, and that's what I put in here. So if you went out and you put Wireshark on your laptop this weekend, and you just collected a PCAP file in your own home network, just by being, you're right there next to your router, then you could go and collect a PCAP, or you can go out or you say, hey, Charles, is there some PCAP files that are out there? Or if you were doing it and you wanted me to send, because we have what's called perfect storm machines, and they are nasty machines that they're designed for pen tests. And so I can create a PCAP that's effective for you to do training with. So if you have a team and you want to get that level, I can guarantee to give you a PCAP that is not like your network, but one that's actually effective using what's called a machine that costs about $200,000 called a perfect storm. And Ohio has 2 of those. So we would go in and collect that, and it's all command line. So for all those individuals who hate it, because we're mostly a GUI world, but in the cyber reserve, everything is in the world of command line interface. There are some packages out there that are like Wireshark that are GUI, but when we're using Zeek, it's all CLI. And then we go in and we collect the logs and such like that. So we go through and that's all I'm going to show you. It's like, hey, you could actually go in and do this lesson, get a PCAP, change the file name or whatever, and then go through this whole exercise. And then you would end up creating what's called a reader report. And a reader report tells you everything bad that's going on in that PCAP. So if it takes me, let's say I collect the PCAP and it took me an hour to collect the data on that, and I like to keep my PCAPs at no bigger than 2 megabytes. So I'll look at what's the amount of data going across there, and then I'll collect and I'll set it up automatically. And Wireshark has that ability. If you were going to use Wireshark, you can go and you can have your computer set up, and you can set up to where it just collects PCAPs on your own home network. And then once they get 2 megabytes, then it saves that file and then goes to the next one, and then you get that. And then you could do a baseline report like that, and then over X number of days, because you'll notice that like at midnight, and you can change the timing on it because you say, well, there's no traffic at midnight other than if you want to catch peaking. for individuals don't know. So perpetrators like to go in and send the data that they're capturing. Let's say you have a keylogger on a person's computer. So it'll keep that data, and then they're going to try to send that data back to Bulgaria. I'm just picking on for Bulgaria, they are Iran. They're going to do it, and they're going to beacon, in other words, send that data in an inconspicuous time, that so that it doesn't get hit, caught. But if you're doing a continuous scan on it, like a school network, then if the beaconing's happening at 1 o'clock in the morning, we're gonna catch it on the scan. So you get this report, and then we get anomalies. Anomalies are just things that the system, it does know certain things happening, but it says, hey, I think there's an anomaly on this computer, on this MAC address. We can get beacons, and then all of a sudden it'll give you a list of all the computers and all the IP addresses that are beaconing, and where they what was the source IP address and the destination IP address. And then I will combine the reports, like with Network Miner and Reader reports. And that's what we do. Like when we are doing a vulnerability assessment mission for your school district, we will use maybe 3 or 4 tools, and we will combine them. And then we'll say, here, because you'll say, like, how many people have, like, parts of the internet blocked so that students can't go out on an Iranian server, right? Or a Chinese server. But then I'll go in and I'll show you, like, here, look, you tell me you've got a block, but I'm going to show you all the places where this is the Chinese server, this is the Chinese server, this is the Chinese server. What happens is you're going to find out that your blocking system is not sufficient. Because, I mean, you're probably using a software package to do it. And then people have workarounds. There are workarounds for everything in computer world. You can shake your head like this, yes. So there's proxy servers, there's all kinds of different things you can do out there to work around defenses. The only thing is that if something goes to a certain IP address that's in Iran, I'm going to tell you it's in Iran. It's in China. It's all those things like that. So the thing is that now, is this all good news? Yeah, good news is that so the superintendent, when you do this, also the superintendent will want to make an announcement to all the teachers. Why do you think they would want to announce to the whole staff that you guys are now have, if you have monitoring in your school district, why would the superintendent want to make an announcement? I will tell you, like in the city of Columbus, they put it in there. They found out all the individuals that were at the main fire station, headquarters, and when they put that, they had a new CISA. This is probably a decade ago. And when they put monitoring in there, they found out all the people that were using the computers to gamble. They found out, they found out more stuff than that, because you go and you're trying to find out positive things that help your district. But if you have an individual that's using the network for improper use, acceptable use policy, you're going to discover it. And that was not your intent when you put it in there. But the thing is that the superintendent, when they get close and say, hey, we're adding monitoring to our system, because if there is a gambling IP address and all of a sudden there's like, well, why is the most talkative machine here is in Charles's office? And then when we look at the IP address he's talking to, it turns out that Charles is gambling all day long. Now that was not your intent. Your intent was look for data breaches, not Charles's, gambling habit. I just made that up. So the thing is that typically when you put monitoring systems in, the superintendent just needs to tell it's just like when you put cameras in the school, you should have an announcement. There's usually signs on the door that says the school's being monitored by cameras, blah, blah, blah. When they put monitoring systems on the computers, you should tell, the superintendent should have an announcement say, hey, we're monitoring for breaches now. And so, so you should have a public service announcement say, hey, on all your computers. So if you're shopping every day in our acceptable use policy says no, and then we can't, because what happens is we're going to definitely see what you'll see in the report, the computers that are talking the most, they just pop out. They'll get you an alert, you'll get an alert. So like if everybody, let's say the whole baseline of the system is, just regular ones, and then all of a sudden you see this big spike over here. And then somebody in the analytics team is going to write a little short report and say, well, Charles is playing, gambling like every Friday afternoon at work. And I can tell, and it's not like he's just doing it while he's working, because I can show how often he's inputting, it's that granular. So it's good that the school puts out an announcement, public service announcements, just like they do for cameras, where they put a sign on the door that says this facility is being monitored by cameras, and it tells everybody that enters there they hit do that. When you do it with computers, you need to tell people that the system is now, once you put in your own taps, that you're going to collect data on there. Now the thing is, in the acceptable use policy, which I've read enough of them in schools, it says that they're only supposed to be using their school device for school level work. So if they talk to their cousin who works at Huntington Bank, they would be in a ton of trouble if you're at Huntington Bank and you went out to Cole's website. Because at Huntington Bank, they have a SOC. And the SOC means they have a real live human monitoring behind the system 24/7. So so Cyber Reserves, usually Ethan Long comes with me and does these presentations on the next one. And Ethan will bring you out and show you, because he works for a retail store, and he works in a SOC with about 25 to 30 people on duty all the time. And they monitor the entire corporation system. So he's looking for anomalies. So the thing is that, so the world slowly but surely getting to a point to where if you go to work, now at home, you can do whatever you want to at home, right? Because you're consistent. But when you go to work, people who already work for the government or whatever like that, they're already used to being, hey, what are you doing? Your boss will get an email and say, hey, your employee is doing this X, Y, Z. And it wasn't what we were looking for. Because nobody volunteers to be in the IT department to be a police officer. So consolidate the network miner and would do packet sent. But you'll see where we always look at what system is doing the most amount of packet sending. Now, we did this at a school system the other day, and we had an individual in the front office, and they just send raw data, not encrypted, and it showed up in a report. So if you send data that's not encrypted, so when your treasurer is sending information to a bank, believe it or not, they go through an encrypted portal. Did you guys know that when they do payroll? But you have other people like counselors, and when they do EMIS, it's an encrypted portal between your district and the state of Ohio. What you're going to find out when you do data flows, you're going to find out some individuals, even doing a vulnerability assessment, some people are actually sending school data in clear. So we had one where we did assessment, and then the school, they immediately stopped the superintendent. They were sending a file in the clear to the state of Oregon at the school district with everybody's password, including the admin passwords for the school district in the clear. It means it wasn't encrypted. And why they were sending the admin passwords, it's just because they were just doing a data dump out of their Active Directory, because the company said, hey, we need this data to do whatever we wanted to do to get them into their system. But since then, they've cleaned it up. But the thing is that doing a vulnerability assessment catches those type of things, because it'll show you all the reports going out that are unencrypted. You can see in the report, everybody in this report, it will show you everybody who sent a message in that PCAP who includes a password. So if they sent their password to somebody, it'll show up in this report. And you would not believe how many people send their passwords to each other. Okay. Could be a substitute teacher, and then you send their password. So long connections, and so it gives you a whole report. Now, almost every one of you guys would sit there and say to me, gosh, Charles, that's nice to know. And maybe it's nice to know, but I just want to tell you that if you put a tap in there, And we just used it like twice a year just to go in and discover port issues and those things. And that's the only thing we use for. It'd be this best $800 because somebody puts a new server or a new network switch in your device, then I would say, Cyber Reserve up and say, hey, can I get one of those at least a week long? So because I got new equipment in there and I want to do a new baseline. And it'll tell you in that report what ports are open, it'll tell you everything. It'll tell you everything. And so if you get new equipment put in, I would contact your local cyber reserve unit. You can contact me and do that. And then I would have a new baseline run with that new equipment. And then it will tell you anything that wasn't done right in the setup versus you going in and looking at every single configuration. You know what that means? If you had to look at all those configurations and you had an outside company put that in for you, and you would say like, hey, did they do it right? We'll run a vulnerability assessment versus you going in there. And even if we just run the vulnerability assessment for a day, it'll tell us all the different things that was set up wrong. So it would be the best 3 8-hour assessment you ever got. So that's what, so to do, because the cyber reserve is staffed to do this all the time. You guys are just going to need to know, like, when do I need to use an assessment when I get new equipment, or I got done with my NIST assessment and I want to have the electronic one to get up, because you'll see in there, it'll say, you need to run a baseline and you probably need to do at least once a year. So if you saw the cyber reservists come in once a year and do the baseline for you, after a while, the cyber reservists will be saying like, hey, I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to write the whole procedure up. But if you still need to use a cyber reservist for 2.5 years just to get the base, and that's your technique, well, the governor of Ohio says it costs $0. It's a service. So the organizations that are in Ohio that use use ITCs, use the cyber reserve, use all this collateral to get things done with a small staff, I think you're the smartest ones in the whole world. But you should do this stuff first, just like this, get all this stuff done. But if you told me that you were coming back in the month of August and you say, hey, I would sure like to put a tap in and then do a baseline, even if it's where the cyber reserve comes out, spends a day, does the baseline, gives you a report at the end of the day, and then when the next day you go on to the next thing on your checklist. And then somebody says, did you get a baseline done? You said, yeah. And I put it on my Outlook calendar every year. I'm going to call cyber reserve in August and everyone get a baseline. Governor might change his mind or her mind if it's a woman 3 years from now and say, yeah, the cyber reserve is not to do it. And then okay, I'm going to put $1,600 and then it'll still give you a report. Anytime the cyber reserve comes in and does something, say, can you leave the procedure for me in case I want to do it? And do that one too. Okay, anybody have any questions on running a reader report? Put the tap in, hit the go button, get your PCAP, do the CLI, and now doing the analytics is a little bit fun because it gives you this list and says, well, these are also suspicious DNS. Now, honestly, what I would do, I'd give it to the superintendent and say, hey, and the superintendent next time they have a staff meeting, and then they can print it all out and say, these 14 pages are bad connections. So obviously, remember we were talking about before about your events? What's your name is again? Aaron. So Aaron sat there and says, we went down to 18. If you run a report and it says that we have connected to 16 pages of bad servers, then our goal would be in the next time we do it, maybe you only have 8 pages of bad servers, right? We want to go down, we want to be going up. So if the report comes out that says that your staff is out there visiting suspected bad places on the internet, then that's security awareness training, and we're not doing good. I mean, just because you sign up to take this training, but nobody's changing their habits, then So then the superintendent, you could go and say, hey, run this report every quarter and then tell me, is the report getting better or worse? Because you can complain all you want, but until the teachers start to change their habits, I mean, you can have all the monitoring you want, but if they're clicking on all these different places and that's what they want to do. And then get this, when the FBI comes out and says, did you know that your teachers were visiting all these Iranian websites, all these Chinese websites, all these suspected North Korean websites? Did you know that? And then, of course, you're going to say, well, we do monitoring every quarter. Here's the reports. Somewhere along the line, the superintendent's got to stand up and say, like, look it, you know, if you're out there visiting a North Korean server, you know, that's not tolerated. Now, they make it look interesting. That's the definition of phishing. They make it look good. It's not like they say, we're from North Korea, we're here to steal your credit card number. They make it look like, hey, download some free music, right? It's gonna look cool. Any questions about, but PCAPs, it takes me a whole whopping 1 day. So if a person joins the Cyber Reserve, by the time they get done with 1 day training, they can run all those programs because I give them step-by-step procedures, and those procedures never change. The data that we collect changes all the time, but the procedures to get the PCAP and do the analysis doesn't change. So it's not as hard to use open source software as possible. Nessus is better. Troy will tell you Nessus is better because once he sets it up, he doesn't have to do nothing anymore other than read the alerts, right? He just goes like this. Anybody sets up a Nessus program or Security Onion and they're running those programs, then they're just getting the alerts. And so that's even better than open source. Okay, cool. But I just wanted to make sure that in our training today that you got to see what a PCAP was and how easy it is to get from PCAP to a report. You don't need like a week's time. You need an hour. You need an hour. You know, and because I'm not going to count, because once I get the PCAP, so let's say I collect PCAPs for 4 hours during the middle school day, I'm not going to stand next to the machine. I'm going to go out to McDonald's and get lunch or whatever. I mean, it's doing this work. When I come back, I just take those PCAPs and I feed them into the program, and out comes the report. Again, it's all automated. All automated. And at the beginning, if you got 33 teachers sending their passwords in a clear, it's going to tell me that. How many people know that that Google has a data leak protection that you set up your school that tells one individual? So schools, when they set up the data leak, they usually set it up and then they're getting alerted all the time. So then they have to send out the parameters to where they don't get alerted every 5 minutes. So, but Google also has data leak prevention to where you can set that up and get and find out which school counselors are sending people like, so it'll like a person will send a social security number, and the Google data leak prevention tool will give you a warning in the IT department that says, hey, somebody's sending a social security number in a clear without being encrypted. Now, it does sound like in the school districts that we need to teach teachers and counselors how to encrypt the file and send it. So when you get a report from us at the Cyber Reserve, we will take your report, we will encrypt it, and then I'll have your phone, and then I will send you the password. So I'll send an encrypted file, and then on another avenue, I will send you the password on how to open that file up. So so when we communicate with you, and we're sending you data like about your school district, we don't send it to you like, oh, here's a report with all the problems of your network, and send it in a clear. Okay, cool. All right. Very good. And then we just got this last thing with logs. And we're almost done for the day. I know it's a lot to digest, but vulnerability management, you guys are farther down than what you think because the ITCs have got you back on this one. You just have to make sure that you're the front line, and then the ITC is doing all the things using the CISA reports. And so logs, the last thing I want to talk about is logs. And we started talking about this logs a long time before. So when you look at does everybody in their school district have a person who specializes in servers? Like, you know, you have a guy or a gal who says, that's my server expert. That's you?
Yeah.
So when you do
I
that,
don't know about expert, but.
okay. So when you do that, you need to go in there. So I put a file in there because there's two different ways you can go about doing it. One, so like if you have like Windows Active Directory or something like that. So you can go out on the internet, which is what I did. It says, okay, here's a log file. So when you go back to work, and you can write down all these settings that are in here. So this is a template to where when you go back to your school, you can fill out what is your password history, what is your maximum password age, what is your minimum password age, what's your password length set at. Sometimes when you go into servers, we went into another one that was kind of like northwest of Columbus, and they had 4 servers, and all 4 servers were configured differently. And the only reason it wasn't because the IT director wanted it that way, it's because over time they had 4 different companies put the servers in. So they brought in, it's a little bit bigger district, so they had a new person start, who turned out to be a server expert. And so they went in, looked at their configurations, and I said, don't change anything until you see what you got. Then sit down and look at what your policies need to be. What is it you really want to be tracking? Now there is guidance on that. So I did this, and this is for you to fill out. But on the bottom of here, I'm sorry, maybe not on that one. Maybe I did send it to you, maybe I didn't. I think I did. I did. So on this one, because you can always go in, how many people know when I talk about CIS controls? Anybody know what that group, do you guys know anything about CIS controls? They're a big networking group. It doesn't cost you any money to join if you need to go out on their website. But when you go to CIS controls, they have anywhere from a 500 to 1,000 page manual for every piece of equipment, from switch to server, to Linux server, to Windows server, you name it, on how to set it up for configuration. And I asked all my server experts, I said, do you guys use CIS controls? He said, I use it like every time they set it up, it goes in, and based upon their configurations, they do that. But remember what I said, if you actually go in and get the PDF, it's like 500 pages, maybe 600 pages, maybe 700 pages. Well, for a bank, that's what they're going to do. I ain't kidding. For a bank, setting up a server, they're going to do that. And the school, I don't know if you have time to go through a 700-page setup configuration. So the thing is that there are guidance on there, and so there's this configuration file. I went in there and did that, and I got it, and it tells you here are my recommended password account lockout, and it goes through the whole thing. So this professional group said 24. And everybody knows what that toggling means. Password age 60, minimum password 14. We know that right now the minimum, if you don't have MFA, the guidance for password lengths on all systems in the United States with no MFA is 15 characters. That's the federal standard or government standard. So the thing is, having an 8-character password doesn't, and everybody, every ITC manager I've ever talked to, says, I talk to the schools and say, if you have an 8-character password, they will bust your password, anybody, in less than a day. Okay.
They get chased out with pitchforks, tarred feather, but tried to tell 15 characters.
Well, the thing is eventually, in order for you, in other words, so like the your accounting department goes through what's called an IRS 1075 audit on, let's say, every 3 years. And there, they have to prove that they're meeting in this standard. Your counselors are, your school district lives on Medicare and Medicaid money. So when you look at the governance section, is that the standard that the schools signed on to, so because a lot of schools don't have a actual full-time lawyer sitting in there, but when you sign for this money, I will tell you, the school has already agreed that they're going to follow the federal standard.
We're even more Medicare, it's worth DOD, so.
Yeah, so in there, you actually, whoever is assigned for that money, the treasurer, the superintendent, they already agreed that they're gonna do the 15 characters.
Oh, yeah, they do, like all their passwords for all other stuff, but if I told them just to get on there, right, oh my God.
I know.
Really, guys, they complain because they have to do MFA. Like,
And you know, and it's gonna be a process as we go up the hill, but every school district ahead of you has already made those changes because because as we get more and more schools get hit, then I tell individuals, I say, like your Groveport and the FBI is sitting right there. I said, these are days that you will never forget your entire life because they're gonna ask you like, what's your password link? And you're gonna wish you're gonna say 15. Because now it's not the superintendent or the teachers talking to you anymore, it's two FBI agents. So, and then the thing is they have access to all the things the superintendent signed. The treasurer says, here, on this date, you signed it, you're compliant. Treasurer, superintendent, I have a signed document right here on November the 12th, 2023, that says you said your network's compliant before you receive this money. So again, it's not gonna be so much you, and I understand the complaining part. But the thing is that they already agreed legally that they're gonna be compliant. So they just, but the thing, that's not the job of the cyber observer, your job to go in there. We just point it out. And then there's between pointing things out, like we don't have a data flow, to getting it done, that could take, if you told me that takes a year to make the change, if you told me it take 18 months, if you know you're in the process of making a change, then you're living in the real world because you can't go back into your school district and change everything in one day. All these things that we're talking about. It's our job is to show you how the standards put together. We know that the ITC is doing vulnerability, ESC, all these people are doing this coverage for you because that's part of your agreement with you and ITC. And so when somebody asks you, do you have monitoring? You say, yes. That's your answer to the question right. But if my guy's out working, that might not be true. So the thing is that, but the other part, we're not gonna talk about passwords with them this month at all, please don't. But but when you ask them to do the data flows, I take a picture of their face for each one as you tell them about the data flows, and then I can post them up on the refrigerator, and you'll try this is what, because they thought you were gonna do all the work, and they had to do nothing. You say, well, you guys are out there signing up for stuff, and you don't even tell me, but I'm the director of IT, and the superintendent's looking at me how to protect this, and I don't even know half the stuff I'm supposed to protect because you don't tell me nothing.
I didn't even know that they got a new program for housing.
Yeah, see?
And they're like, oh, we had this meeting at this time. Like,
Yeah.
For what? For this website.
Yeah. And you say, did you vet the vendor?
Do you hear the key word there? Software? Like, can I be any part of this?
There you go. It's going to take a little bit of time, but all the school districts that were working on this a year ago, you will hear, if we had those in the office here or in the classroom, you'll say little by little, they're making progress. And but that's true about safety and everything else. So I did give you a file to where these are the recommended industry changes that you would have for long. So my challenge to you, if you have some windows, some of you don't have to do logs. It is on my goal sheet to do the best settings for Google. And there's a guy here in Ohio that goes to a lot of seminars. He's an expert on Google configurations, because believe it or not, when you guys go and set up your Google, you can go and do logs in Google too on your cloud management servers. And the thing is that, so the Cyber Reserve just needs a little bit more time to go in and say, and come out with like, this is what we think is the best configuration for this type of server, this type of Google setup and stuff like that. So we have a group working on this kind of things. But anyway, I did put those. So if you didn't have anything set up for your server logs now, but you could go in there and I've set up logs. You say, well, maybe I don't want to look at all my audit security state changes. And there's a description on every configuration. And when I tell you there's 500-page manuals on configuring a single Windows 2019 server, I'm telling you the truth. So it's a big subject, configuration. So if you are been inherited, like I got this server, just, you know, and you sat there and you got in there, if out of the log discussion today is, hey, maybe I need to call Charles and then I can get a cyber reservist who Windows server or Linux servers is their thing and then send them your way. Because I have individuals who are hardware. I mean, that's their thing. They're in the cyber reserve, but they are hardware, server, switch, Cisco people. And then they could work with you. So when it comes to logs, if you got your logs and you're doing your logs, you see your logs and you know that all your servers are set up correctly, because in the process, it's going to say, are you collecting logs? And then someday after we're collecting logs, then we're going to get to a point to where, you know, when we come and visit your school, we can sit down and say, how do we want to go about reviewing the logs? Do we want to review them every 6 months? And then we break down a process based upon what would we look in the logs? Oh, we're looking for like failed login attempts and those type of things. So not everything has to get done in one day, but if you have logs are done, if your logs are set up and you get hit with a cyber attack, who's going to want to look at your logs? The people in the red shirts. We would be so happy if you say, well, we went to that training, we set up our logs, because what we're going to do is we're going to do a log analysis on, you know, where we combine all the logs and we do a log analysis. We do that. So if the thing is that you're collecting a log so that a professional like the cyber reservist can come in when there's an attack, so we can do log analysis and tell us how they got into your system, then that's a win there too. Okay. So I don't ever want you to be like driving home thinking like, I got to do all these things. It's just that somewhere on your line, you'll sit there and say, hey, it's July the 27th. I think I got these other things done. I think we're down to logs now, and I'm going to call Charles and then get me a person who can come spend a day with me and we'll do logs. If you do it by yourself, you'll probably be the most miserable person in the whole world. You might find out in the ITC, like if your ITC person is your servers, they probably have a whole log set up because they've followed their own written protocol, and then you're good to go. At that point, just ask your ITC person, hey, what are our log configurations? And then make sure you know that so that you can go in and have that written down. Okay. When you want to learn log analysis work, again, call the cyber reserve and say, hey, I want to go in and see how you do log analysis on this server or all my machines. And then we'll just schedule a day and they'll come in and then work with you and they'll show you how they do it in the process. Okay, cool. Other than that, it's 12:04 and your guys' bellies will probably be saying it's getting be lunchtime. And I know we covered a lot of things, all to do with vulnerability management, and we snuck in a little bit on data flows so that you can give some homework to your superintendent and principals and accounting people. Anybody have any last questions? Any questions, Jerry? We have any more questions out there in New Philly?
I don't believe so.
I know they're all probably hungry now. So when we come back and do seminar 4 has gets back to almost like risk management. There's a lot of fun, interactive things to do. A lot of form, where we get to pick out critical systems and things like that. So that's, so seminar 4 is much more interactive, where you get to do stuff versus that. When we come back with after we finish the 5 seminars, and your ITC members get assigned their cyber range accounts, then and they want to go out and practice, then the cyber reserve will have classes, and of course then that's all 100% interactive, because we'll all be on the cyber range on the same training, and it'll be all about this for detection and mapping, Nessus, all that stuff. Other than that, that's all I got for you today, Jerry.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.